The rain tapped gently on the windows of Rosie's Place, a small-town diner nestled off a quiet road in rural Indiana. Morning had just broken, casting a dull gray light across the counter and rows of booths. The scent of fried eggs, brewed coffee, and freshly buttered toast filled the air, wrapping the place in a kind of comforting warmth. It was the kind of diner where the regulars all knew each other's names, but no one really knew anyone's story, not the ones that mattered. Emma. Reynolds moved through the space like a shadow with purpose. She wiped down the tabletops, lined up the sugar jars, and straightened the menus with care. Her motions were quiet and practiced, honed over countless 5 a.m. starts. Her dark auburn hair was pulled back into a messy bun, loose strands framing a pale face lined with exhaustion, but the fatigue in her eyes wasn't just from waking up before the sun. It was from carrying too much, too alone. She was 29, a single mother to a 6-year-old daughter named Lily who had just started first grade. Lily still liked to leave crayon hearts in Emma's apron pocket, and at home, in a recliner that hadn't been moved for a year, sat her father, once a factory worker with hands of iron, now frail and silent after the stroke that stole his words. Most people just saw Emma as the waitress. They didn't see the nights she spent helping her father to the bathroom or the mornings she skipped breakfast so Lily could have hers. They didn't see the stack of unpaid medical bills tucked under her mattress, or how she had to choose between groceries and gas more times than she could count. They just saw the apron, the coffee pot, the half-smile, as she moved toward the kitchen pass. Her thoughts flickered like a low flame. If I can just get through today, maybe I'll make enough in tips to buy Lily her school shoes. Shoes that didn't have holes. Shoes that wouldn't make her daughter feel small. Order up, Spatty called from the kitchen, her raspy voice echoing through the diner. Coming, Emma answered, forcing a smile as she reached for the plate. She adjusted the cups, trying to keep her hands from trembling. The warmth of the dishes was a small comfort against the cold ache in her chest. That's when the bell above the door jingled. Emma turned slightly, already ready to offer a friendly greeting, but her smile faltered the moment she saw him. He walked in with polished shoes and a tailored suit that didn't belong in a place where the menu was laminated and the pancakes cost $4.99. Richard Malone, mid-40s, arrogant, entitled, a regular. Though no one wanted him to be. Emma stiffened. She'd served him before. Too many times he always chose her section, always made comments, jokes that weren't jokes, smiles that felt like threats. She tried to brush him off, laugh when she needed to, and disappear when she couldn't, but something about this morning felt heavier, more fragile, like one wrong word might shatter her completely. He slid into a booth, smirking like he owned the place. Morning, sweetheart, he said, eyes trailing her as she approached. Good morning, Mr. Malone, she replied, her voice quiet but steady. What can I get for you? The usual, and make it quick. I've got real people to see today. She nodded and turned back toward the counter, heat rising to her face. You could feel his eyes lingering like fingerprints pressed into her skin. Behind the counter, Emma steadied herself with one hand. She didn't cry, she wouldn't, she had work to do. A shift to finish, a daughter counting on her. She picked up the coffee pot and made her way back to his table, every step feeling longer than it should. The diner buzzed around her, of cutlery, murmured conversation, the hiss of the grill. But all she heard was the pounding in her chest, and something else, a voice in her mind. Just get through today. Just today. What she didn't know, what she couldn't possibly have known, was that this morning, someone was watching. Someone who'd seen enough of life to recognize when someone needed help, and that by the time this shift ended, her life was going to change. Not because she fought back, but because someone finally stood beside her and said, "That's enough." The bell above the door had barely stopped ringing before Richard Malone slid into his usual booth like he owned the place. He was the kind of man whose cologne arrived 5 seconds before he did. Sharp, overpowering, and unapologetically artificial. Tall, mid-40s, with slicked-back dark hair and a suit so expensive it didn't belong anywhere near a place that served hash browns on chipped plates. But Richard didn't care. He liked the contrast. It made him feel superior. And more than anything, Richard Malone liked feeling superior. Emma saw him the moment he walked in, and her heart sank. She knew this game, knew the rules. Smile. Stay calm. Don't give him a reason to escalate. Don't let him see the way he made her stomach twist. He smirked as he sat, his eyes already tracing her like she was something on a clearance rack. Morning, sweetheart, he said, leaning back in the booth as if he belonged there more than she did. Emma tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear and forced a tight smile. Good morning, Mr. Malone. What can I get for you? Same as always, and make it quick. I've got places to be, he said, snapping open his phone without looking up. She turned quickly, heading to the kitchen, keeping her head down. Patty didn't ask questions, just slid a plate of eggs and toast onto the counter. Emma poured the coffee with a shaky hand and walked it back, slow and careful, as if carrying something explosive. She placed the cup in front of him, hoping, praying, he'd just eat and leave. But she already knew better. You ever get tired of being on your feet, honey? Richard asked, loud enough for the whole section to hear. Bet you'd rather be wrapped around mine. His laugh was sharp, mocking it. Man 2 tables over glanced up, then quickly down at his paper. A woman frowned into her coffee cup but said nothing. The air shifted, the way it always did when something ugly started creeping into a room. Emma froze, then straightened. Her fingers clenched tighter around the coffee pot handle. She didn't look at him, she didn't answer. She just turned, ready to escape back into the safety of the kitchen, of clanging pans and noise that could drown out everything. But Richard wasn't done, you know. He called after her, voice rich with smirk and cruelty. With a body like that, you're wasting yourself behind a counter. The words hit like ice water. Her ears burned, her cheeks flamed red. She kept walking, kept breathing. It was the only power she had left in that moment to walk away, even if everything inside her was breaking. Behind the counter, she set down the pot with trembling hands. She gripped the edge of the counter and stared at the worn-out linoleum. She had heard worse. From strangers, from people she once trusted. But this was the kind of slow erosion that wore a soul down over time. The daily ache of being seen as nothing more than something to look at, or laugh at. Never seen, never really seen. Just get through today, she told herself again. The words now more like a plea than a mantra. The diner buzzed around her, but it all blurred the clinking silverware, the hum of the fridge, the scratch of a pen on a check. Her world narrowed to the pounding of her heart and the taste of humiliation at the back of her throat. And no one said a word. Not yet. At the far end of the diner, in the corner booth, where the light barely reached, sat a man most people didn't notice. Walter Briggs, 67, wiry, with deep lines carved into his weathered face and a beard that hadn't seen a razor in weeks. His clothes were layered, patched, and faded, the uniform of someone who'd learned how to survive with little, and expect even less. A worn duffel bag sat beside him, tucked tight to the wall like it held the last of his dignity. Walter came to Rosie's place maybe twice a week, when he could scrape together enough change for the $3 breakfast special. Patty never rushed him. Emma always served him with quiet kindness and never once asked why he came in just to nurse a black coffee for an hour. This morning, Walter had watched the exchange from behind his chipped mug. He saw the tight smile Emma wore when the man in the suit walked in, saw the way her hands began to tremble. He heard the way Richard Malone's voice rose, not by accident, but with intention, loud enough to humiliate, loud enough to silence. Walter knew that kind of voice. He'd heard it in barracks and battlefields. He'd heard it in shelters, job lines, and at bus stations. He'd heard it in the bitter silence of those who let cruelty slide just to avoid conflict. Then it came again. Hey baby, give us a smile. The words echoed across the diner like a slap, and Emma froze at the counter, coffee pot trembling. In her hand. She didn't turn around this time. She didn't have to. Walter set down his mug, stood slowly, his joints protested, but his heart was steady. He didn't speak right away. He just walked toward the booth where Richard sat, arrogance oozing from every thread of his tailored suit. Walter's voice was quiet, but it carried, low and calm. That's enough. The room froze. Forks paused, midway to mouths. Conversations stopped in their tracks. Even the old jukebox humming in the corner seemed to dim. Richard looked up, stunned for a second, before letting out a condescending laugh. Mind your business, old man. Walter didn't flinch, didn't blink. She is my business, he said, his eyes steady. She's working, trying to make it through the day. You think being cruel makes you powerful. It doesn't. It makes you pathetic. Silence hung in the air like dust in a beam of sunlight. Richard opened his mouth, then shut it. He looked around, maybe expecting someone to back him up. No one did. He scoffed, pushed his chair back with a sharp scrape against the tile, and stood. Asterisk, whatever, he muttered. He tossed a few crumpled bills onto the table less than the check and stormed out, the bell above the door jingling like a final slap. Asterisk, for a second, no one moved. Emma stood frozen, her eyes wide, her chest rising and falling like she'd been holding her breath since dawn. And then, just like that, the air changed. She exhaled, a breath she didn't know she'd been carrying for years. Asterisk, the coffee pot in her hand slowly lowered to the counter. Her fingers loosened. Asterisk, she walked toward the corner booth, her steps slow, unsure. Walter had already sat back down, reaching for his lukewarm mug. Asterisk, thank you, she said, her voice breaking slightly. I didn't know anyone would ever speak up. Walter looked up at her, and there was no pride in his eyes, just quiet truth. No one should stand alone, he said, simply. Asterisk, and in that moment, Emma felt it to ground beneath her feet, the warmth in her chest, the spark of something long lost, hope. Asterisk, the morning rush had faded. The clinking of dishes, the sharp sizzle from the kitchen, the hum of overlapping conversations all had quieted into a soft, tired calm. The light through the diner windows had turned gentler, the rain outside now just a faint mist. Rosie's place felt like it was catching its breath. Asterisk, Emma, still wearing her apron but finally moving without urgency, carried a plate with a generous slice of apple pie and a small scoop of vanilla ice cream melting at its side. She walked over to the corner booth where Walter sat quietly, sipping the last of his coffee. She set the plate down in front of him with a small smile. It's on the house, she said. Patty's recipe. Figured you earned a little sweetness. Today. Walter looked up, his weathered face cracking into the faintest grin. Apple pie, he murmured. Now that's something. Without asking, Emma slid into the seat across from him. You didn't have to do that, she said softly. Walter set down his mug and looked at her. Really looked. I know, he said. But I've got a daughter. She's about your age, works in Chicago. If someone ever talked to her the way that man talked to you, I'd want someone to say something. Asterisk, Emma blinked, caught off guard by the gentleness in his voice. So many people said nothing, so many turned away, but not him. Asterisk, for the first time all day she let herself stop pretending. The exhaustion and emotion caught up to her. She leaned back, eyes glassy. Asterisk, I didn't even know how much I needed someone to say it until you did, she whispered. I've been serving that man for months, taking it, swallowing it. I didn't think anyone noticed. Walter nodded slowly. Noticed, he said. Sometimes, that's all it takes, someone noticing. Asterisk, they sat in silence for a moment as he lifted his fork and took a bite of the pie. He closed his eyes briefly. Asterisk, damn, he said. Tastes like memory. Asterisk, Emma chuckled. It felt good. Honest. Asterisk, you live around here? She asked, then winced. Sorry. That's probably a rude question. Asterisk, nah, Walter replied, shaking his head. Not rude, just real. Asterisk, he paused, then said, I sleep at the shelter when there's space. When there's not, I stay behind the church on 9th. Been that way for a few years now. Asterisk, Emma looked down at her hands. I'm sorry, asterisk, don't be, he said. I had a good life once, wife named Lillian, sweetest woman you'd ever meet. We were married 28 years. Cancer took her in 6 months. That kind of loss. You don't come back from that the same. He took another bite, slower now. After she passed, I couldn't focus. Lost my job, tried to hold on to the house, but it slipped away, one thing after another. You blink, and suddenly you're nobody. Emma's throat tightened. I wish I could help you, she said quietly. Walter smiled, eyes soft. You already did, he said. You gave me pie, and your time. That matters more than you think. Asterisk, Emma wiped a tear from the corner of her eye. She didn't know what to say. Asterisk, as Walter stood to leave, he reached into the inside pocket of his worn coat and pulled out a folded piece of paper. He laid it gently on the table in front of her. Asterisk, my daughter's a caseworker. Works at the Women's Resource Center on Jefferson Street, he said. I told her about you once, when you brought me an extra cup of coffee on a cold morning. She said if you ever wanted to change things, really, change them, she could help. Asterisk, Emma stared at the note, unsure what to feel. Asterisk, Walter gave her one last smile, quiet, humble, deeply human. Asterisk, don't let that fire inside you die, Emma, he said. You deserve more than just surviving. Asterisk, and with that, he turned and walked out, his coat flapping gently behind him, leaving behind the scent of rain, warm pie, and a silence filled with something bigger than words. Asterisk, the rain tapped softly against the windows of Rosie's place, a small-town diner tucked along a quiet Indiana highway. the scent of brewed coffee and fried eggs wrapped around the worn booths like an old blanket. Emma Reynolds moved from table to table, her eyes heavy, her hands practiced. At 29, she wasn't tired from waking at 5 a.m., she was tired from life, a single mother to 6-year-old Lily and caretaker to her father after his stroke. Emma lived day to day, tip to tip, hope to hope. If I can just get through today, she thought, maybe I'll make enough for Lily's school shoes. Order up, Patty shouted from the kitchen. Emma forced a smile and called, coming. Just as the bell above the front door jingled, in walked Richard Malone, sharp suit, slick hair, smug smile, a regular, a problem, He took his usual booth in her section. Of course, morning sweetheart, he said, looking at her like she was a product on a shelf. Good morning, Mr. Malone, what can I get for you? Same as always. And make it quick, I've got places to be. She nodded and returned, with his coffee. You ever get tired of being on your feet? Honey, Richard leered. Bet you'd rather be wrapped around mine. A loud laugh. Just loud enough for the room to hear. A few customers glanced over. No one said a word. Emma's grip tightened around the coffee pot. Her knuckles went white. She said nothing. Richard smirked. With a body like that, you're wasting yourself behind a counter. Cheeks burning, heart pounding. She turned away. Another storm swallowed. Another day endured. Hey baby, give us a smile. That's when the voice came. Quiet, firm, still. That's enough. The diner went silent. Every head turned toward the far corner booth. An old man stood, thin, hunched slightly, scruffy beard. Walter Briggs, a Vietnam vet. Homeless, he'd come in now and then for the $3 breakfast special. No one ever paid him much attention. Mind your business, old man, Richard snapped. But Walter didn't flinch. She's working, he said, trying to make it through the day. You think being cruel makes you powerful. It makes you pathetic. Richard sneered, tossed a few bills on the table, and stormed out. The door slammed. The bell jingled once. Emma stood frozen. Her eyes met Walter's for the first time in what felt like years. She felt seen. Later. After the rush died down, Emma brought Walter a slice of apple pie on the house. You didn't have to do that, she said, sliding into the booth across from him. I know, he said softly, but I've got a daughter, I'd want someone to speak for her too. They talked. She learned about the wife he lost to cancer 10 years ago. The job he lost after the home that slipped through the cracks. Now he slept behind the church, or in shelters when he could. Yet he carried kindness like it was the last thing that belonged to him. Emma's throat tightened. I wish I could help you, she whispered. You.